I read somewhere that something like 90% of the folks in this world are right-handed. That means that most people's right hand is probably a little bit stronger than their left hand. One thing I have a problem with, now I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a psychologist, I don't know about all this brain stuff, but I do believe in the power of suggestion. And if the brain hears a word or a phrase often enough, I'm sure that it gets ingrained, whether it's in the subconscious or however it is. But I believe that what you hear, becomes what you think becomes what you are. So, do you really have a weak hand? I hear instructors, whether it's in person at training classes or whether it's on the YouTube experts, people talk about weak hand firing. You grip the gun with your strong hand, and then you also then grip it with your weak hand, or can you shoot it with your weak hand? I don't have the strength I had when I was in my younger years, but I don't have a weak hand. Now, there are some folks who may have a particular issue, whether it's medical or an injury or whatever, that may cause one hand to actually be weak. But I bet for most of you, you have a dominant hand and a secondary hand. I bet one of your hands isn't weak. And the whole idea of letting your brain think that one hand is weak may come back to haunt you someday. I don't like the term weak hand. You have a primary hand, that's my right hand, is my primary hand, or my dominant hand. That's the hand I usually hold my coffee cup with. And I have a secondary hand. This hand is not weak. Okay, compared to somebody like Lou Ferrigno, maybe it's weak, but not in the overall scheme of things. So I don't want my brain to think that. So just a suggestion, every time you hear somebody say weak hand, replace it mentally with secondary hand or support hand or backup hand. Don't think of it as weak. Get that term out of your vocabulary. And along with that, practice with that secondary hand. You never know when your primary hand may not work. Your secondary hand needs to kick in. And if your brain is thinking that that's a weak hand, it may not work well. If you haven't practiced with it, it may not, in fact, it won't work well if you haven't practiced with it. So I suggest that at least half of your range practice be working the firearm with your secondary hand, with your support hand, being able to function that firearm with just that hand. Get weak hand and strong hand out of your vocabulary. Primary hand, secondary hand, they both work. One is not weak. Thanks for listening to another rant from Riders Range.